Hey friends, welcome back to Gaming with Amy. I hope you're all doing well, and welcome to the channel if you're new. Today I have a different type of video for you. As you may know, I'm a guitarist and musician, in addition to being a gaming enthusiast, so I thought I'd chat about some of my favorite albums of all time. These are albums that I'll never get sick of, and if I do, well, then you'll know something's wrong with me. While many of these artists span genres, they all really have one thing in common: catchy songwriting. Don't get me wrong, I appreciate all types of music, from funk to metal to the avant-garde, but when a song is stuck in my head, I know it'll never leave me. This is simply what I'm always drawn to. One quick thing before we get into the list, I'd really appreciate it if you could like this video, and if you feel so inclined, subscribe to the channel for more music and cozy gaming content. Without further ado, here are the albums I'll never get sick of. The Replacements, Let It Be. One of my very favorite bands is The Replacements, the four-piece punk-adjacent band from Minneapolis. They are, in my opinion, one of the best and most important rock bands of the 80s and 90s, maybe of all time. That said, it's hard for me to pick a single Replacements album as my de facto favorite. My heart always goes with 1984's Let It Be, whose title is an unserious Beatles reference. This album means a lot to me because it was introduced to me by my guitar teacher, who I spent countless years studying with. At my very core, I love pop music. The hooks, the harmonies, the floating feeling I get listening to a perfectly crafted pop song. Let It Be is undoubtedly a pop record under the guise of a punk album. Any worthwhile punk music is. It's what sets them apart from some of their peers. I'm gonna be a hater for a second and call it Husker Du specifically. I just don't get that band. Paul Westerberg is the master of melody, and you either have it or you don't. Also, they somehow made a Kiss song likable, and if you know me, I do not like Kiss. I'd say that's a pretty impressive feat for a band that doesn't take itself too seriously. So yeah, check out Let It Be and all of the Replacements albums if you haven't before. I think you'll love them. Fountains of Wayne, Welcome Interstate Managers. Speaking of pop music, Fountains of Wayne is yet another underrated band that's mostly lost to time. Except for me, I guess. To be honest, I'm most familiar with their 2003 album, Welcome Interstate Managers. I first learned of the album because of their infectious hit Stacy's Mom, which is still a banger. I also love how silly the song is, and the rest of the album as well. Fountains of Wayne is a band with people who are excellent musicians but write goofy lyrics. And while that may feel unserious, I'd counter that with, have you ever written a hit pop song before? They're musical geniuses. Welcome Interstate Managers is one of those albums that you can put on whenever and you'll just have a good time listening to it. It's catchy, the production is on point, and it's pretty fun to play along to on guitar. Christian Lee Hutson, Beginners. I'm sensing a theme with my favorite albums because Christian Lee Hutson is a funny guy too. Hutson's songwriting, particularly on the album Beginners, paints a detailed picture of the story he wants to tell, all with witty lyrics and hushed singing. I first became familiar with Hutson after seeing him open for Phoebe Bridgers, which is honestly my favorite way to discover new artists. From there, I started listening to his first album, Beginners, on repeat. Most of the album is stripped down, often just Hutson and an acoustic guitar. But my favorite song has to be Get the Old Band Back Together, a full band track that details the difficulty of keeping a band together because, well, life happens. It's incredibly funny and an earworm. Alvvays, self-titled. The first time I heard Archie Marry Me, I knew I was going to love the band Alvvays. Clearly influenced by bands like Pavement and Teenage Fan Club, Alvvays took this inspiration and gave their own spin on jangly indie rock with their self-titled debut. Archie Marry Me is the clear standout on the album, and the reason is obvious. It's one of the catchiest songs to come out in the last decade. It also does that thing where the song lyrics are actually quite sad, but it's contrasted with a happy-sounding, upbeat melody. To me, this combination is literally perfect. Singer and guitarist Molly Rankin also has the sweetest sounding voice and comes up with lyrics you wish you'd written yourself. Talking Heads, Stop Making Sense. Talking Heads' live album, Stop Making Sense, is life-changing stuff. I've seen the film many times over, but I knew I had to see it in theaters when A24 re-released and restored it last year. I'm so glad I did too, because it was a mind-blowing experience, and it made me appreciate the album and the band in a completely different way. Although the film Stop Making Sense is a crucial component to the experience, the album itself is just an absolute banger and inspiring to listen to. It's incredible that around the time this was filmed, The band members were likely not seeing eye to eye, creatively speaking, yet they did this live album that shows them at the top of their game. I truly don't think there's a better band than Talking Heads, and Stop Making Sense is clear evidence of that. Paramore, After Laughter. I grew up during a period where there was a lot of bad pop-punk music being released. I listened to a lot of it too, so I'm pretty much an expert. And of course, bad music isn't confined to just a single decade or time period, but I feel the pop-punk of the early to mid-2000s does not hold up. There is, however, one band that has stood the test of time and transformed into something all their own: Paramore. Paramore's transformation began with their 2017 album After Laughter, and it's sincerely one of my favorite albums in general, and also a great example of how you should never stop growing as a musician. The album tackles topics like mental health, friendship, and strained romantic relationships. And the musicianship from the core band and the hired players is top-notch. For me, Paramore is one of the most exciting working bands today, and I can't wait to see what they do next. Bright Eyes. I'm wide awake, it's morning. Bright Eyes is a band that changed everything for me as a musician. I've been a fan for literal decades at this point, and part of that is because of their album I'm Wide Awake, It's Morning. Bright Eyes was labeled as an emo band, which I think is accurate, so this album in particular was quite an interesting move in the band's trajectory. I'm Wide Awake, It's Morning is at its core a country and folk album. Emmylou Harris, one of the most beloved country singers of all time, is featured on most of the album's songs. It's absolutely a country music album, and it completely took me off guard. Country was never my genre, so I had some hang-ups about it. But I'm Wide Awake, It's Morning helped me appreciate the genre in a completely different way. Plus, this album is undeniably a masterpiece and one of the band's best to date. Jenny Lewis, Acid Tongue. Finally, we have another indie emo darling who went the country and folk route later in their career. In case you aren't familiar with Jenny Lewis, she started the band Rilo Kiley, who were hugely successful by indie standards in the early to mid-2000s. And then she went solo, and I truly cannot thank her enough for this. Acid Tongue, Lewis's second solo album, is one of those albums that still feels shiny and new every time I listen to it. While her first album, Rabbit Fur Coat, is also a masterpiece, Acid Tongue feels a tad bit more polished and confident, as if she's more comfortable with her solo success. Also, if you ever get the chance to see her live, which you should, she'll probably play the title song. It's an absolute treat to hear it in a live setting. It's a full body chills sort of situation. Honorable mentions. Since this video is getting lengthy, I thought I'd just briefly mention a couple of more albums. Coconut Records' Night Timing is pop perfection, but sadly only one of two albums we've gotten from bandleader Jason Schwartzman. Jason, I'm begging you to make more Coconut Records albums. I also really love New Order's Power, Corruption, and Lies. It's catchy, sonically interesting, and endlessly fun to dance to. So there you have it. Albums I'll listen to until I'm an old lady because they're just that good. I'd love to know what your favorite albums are too. Go ahead and comment down below with your picks. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.